Hello and welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sedna Bokiria, and it's my honor to introduce Mr. Shawn Dove this morning, depending on where you are. So Shawn has an incredible bio, and he gave me the liberty of shortening it, and it was very difficult, and I feel like everything needs to be shared with you all. So bear with me here as I share this incredible work. So he has almost 4 decades of cross-sectional leadership in the fields of youth development, community building, philanthropy, arts education, leadership development, and media literacy. He serves as the founder of the Corporation for Black Male Achievement. He served as the CEO for the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Among his key accomplishments were supporting the launch of President Obama's My Brother's Keepers initiative. I'm already out of breath. Brokering and pioneering partnership between OSF, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the City of New York to launch the NYC Young Men's Initiative, serving as a key organizer of the launch of the Executives Alliance to expand opportunities for boys and young men of color. He has a longtime commitment to multimedia narrative change efforts. He is the co-author of I Too Am America on loving and leading Black men and boys. He has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Key to the City of Louisville, Black Enterprise's inaugural 2017 BE Modern Man of the Year, Ebony Magazine's Power 100 in 2016, and it is my honor to introduce him to you today.
Yay, Shawn, thank you so much. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. When I joined earlier, it was just Katie and I on the Zoom. I was sharing with Katie, oh God, I'm nervous. And she said, you're gonna be fine. And I decided to, and I'm seeing so many friendly faces. This is like a family gathering. And so just want to just thank everyone for joining. And this is so much of a dream come true. Some folks have asked me, how long, Shawn, have you been writing this book? I think the answer is, how long has this book been writing me? And the answer to that question is, I'll be 59 next month. It's I've been writing this for 59 years, right? And so I decided to bring some folks into the room with me. Many of my supporters and what I like to call midwives are on the screen. But I thought I would bring Langston Hughes in the room with me, who the title of this book, we borrowed the title from the great Harlem Renaissance poet and author and activist. And Langston said, I too sing America. I am the darker brother they send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. And the book, I Too Am America, on loving and leading Black men and boys, just want to let you know that it's more than a book. It's been a lifetime journey, but I really see it as a seed and a catalyst for building community, continuing my mission and calling of Black male achievement and connecting leaders and improving the life outcomes for Black men and boys. It's also an invitation to love, learn, and lead with, from, and on behalf of Black men and boys. It's also my gift of imperfection. You know, we talked about the writing of it, right? In the process. And I know folks wanted to know about the problem. Lord, it has been an excavation of the soul, right? I'm like, God, people volunteer to write books and to do this. It has been an excavation of the soul, but also a necessary one, because this book, in so many ways, has been blocking the creative birth canal of what so much is coming through me. And, there's this Gnostic gospel that says, from St. Thomas, that says, if you get out of you what's inside of you, it will save you. If you don't get out of you what's inside of you, it will destroy you. So I was like, I got to get this book out of me or I will be destroyed. And I often tell this story in my leadership journey because what you didn't hear in my bio is the most important line of my bio is the bottom line. Married to my divine mate, Desiree, and I am the dad of Nia, Maya, Cameron, and Caleb, my adulting children that are still home. And quite often my prayer is, forgive them, Lord. They know not that they dance on my last nerve. And I tell the story often of being in the delivery room for all 4 of my children, right? And I don't have the time to tell the entire story, but it was there for Nia, my firstborn, which took pictures all day. And they finally had to induce labor. Maya, who exploded on the scene 1 hour after the first contraction. My twin boys, Cameron and Caleb, my wife Desiree had to go on bed rest. And after 20 weeks, and when it was time for her to deliver, they weren't ready for a C-section. And she pushed out Cameron, my firstborn son, my twin boy. I have twin boys. And no matter how hard she pushed, Caleb was not coming out. And Caleb was what you call breech. 9 minutes after his twin brother, Cameron, hit the scene, Caleb's vital signs began to drop. Desiree done pushed out 3 babies already. But no matter how hard she pushed, Caleb wasn't coming out. And at 9 minutes, as his vital signs were dropping, the doctor said, I have to go in and I have to pull him out. It was excruciating for Desiree. It was somewhat excruciating for me as she dug her nails in my arms and screamed, but Caleb was delivered. And in that moment, for me, was this metaphor that I know that all of us, we have delivered some really wonderful things in our lives, right? But the thing that God really wants us to deliver, we have to go to someone else, get vulnerable and say, I have something inside of me and I need your help to get it out. And that has been the process of birthing this book, I Too Am America. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the podcast host, Charles Corporal, Dr. Charles Corporal, he asked me, what was the genesis of and what inspired you writing this book, Shawn? And instinctively, I broke out and let him know that whilst at poetry in motion, I stopped to look for a brother with ways to write a book. Arrange round me with a story to tell, a billion brothers who know all too well about unwritten words that unwillingly die before bred and bound and able to fly. Why do my brother's words wear weights of woe? My ears to the ground, I'm dying to know. We must give our words wings so they can sing a song for all brothers they will bring. The ability to dream, to fly, and to soar. It's to you, my brothers, these words are for. To give your words a life, you must sit and write your story with tales of what life is like. Do me a favor and set your words free, because I need to hear them. Do it for me. And that's a poem that I wrote in 1988. I was at the tail end of my drug addiction, right? And I wrote that poem, and I tell the story in the book. I was leading the youth program that I grew up in, the Dome Project, when I was at the tail end of my drug addiction, of marijuana, alcohol, and cocaine. And this poem was part of writing and publishing has always been my salvation. It was part of a publication and program called Poetry in Motion, off-court creations, where we were working with young men and using basketball and basketball digest and sports literacy to increase their literacy. And when I said this poem, I've been reciting this poem that I wrote in 1988 all this year and realized that for so long, I've been running away from my calling. And so I wanted to read a little bit from the introduction of I Too Am America. I Too Am America is equal parts a memoir, my story. One of my favorite quotes is from Brene Brown, and Brene Brown says that owning your story and loving yourself through the process is the bravest thing you will ever do. And this is like one of my greatest acts of bravery. There's this adage going around saying that vulnerability is the new sexy. I'm feeling real sexy right now. And so here are a few lines from the introduction, right? And I was sharing, so it's equal parts memoir, my story. We follow Jamare Winston from Detroit, and we tell his story as a young man growing up in Detroit, dealing with the paradox of promise and peril. We also follow and tell the story of Romero from Oakland, and these are young men that I've been engaged with in the campaign for Black Male Achievement. We tell the stories of their mentors, Chris Chapman in Oakland and Quan Nellums in Detroit. So it's storytelling, but it's also equal parts a account of the campaign for Black Male Achievement. This catalytic movement I've helped to ignite over the last dozen years. And it's equal parts manifesto, where I've curated stories and insights from a group of leaders, right? So I didn't do this all by myself. The last part of the book is curated mini manifestos from leaders in the field. But this is what I write in the introduction. Poetry, writing, and publishing have long been my salvation, my healing balm, my go-to when nothing else seems to ease whatever is ailing my heart and soul. As a 16-year-old boy on a prep school campus in the boonies of Massachusetts and far from my New York City neighborhoods, I discovered my penchant for writing and reciting poetry. A strange man in a strange land, poetry centered my inner compass and allowed me to cope with my life. Poetry provided an escape hatch to free me from the tightening grips of adolescent flailing. Depression I didn't even know I had, and a deepening addiction to drugs and alcohol. Poetry nudged me through a fuzzy liminal feeling that I had a purpose for my life, one I worried I would never find. Poetry allowed me to put those fragile feelings and unexplored emotions first on paper and then spoken out loud into my world. That self-expression, my spoken word, saved me from myself. I didn't know it at the time, but poetry saved my life. With profound respect for poets and life-saving reverence for the often grueling process of producing poetry, we borrow the title of this book from the venerable Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes. The moment my co-author Nick Childs suggested the title, I Too Am America, and I added the subtitle on loving and leading Black men and boys, I knew it perfectly captured the story I wanted to share in this book. The story of a Black baby boy born in 1962 in New York City during the Civil Rights Movement, who comes of age and grapples with the paradox of promise and peril for most Black boys and men in America. When Langston Hughes penned his prophetic poem in 1926, He portrayed what it meant to be Black in America. I Too profoundly depicts the paradox of promise and peril in just 62 words. Sadly, almost a century later, the tomorrow he foretells has yet to become today. Hughes wrote his poem during the Harlem Renaissance, a seminal movement to claim our culture and proclaim our worth in this country. We wrote this book in 2019 and 2020 during the equally powerful emergent movement for Black lives. In the wake of the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, among too many others, and amid a global pandemic, this country wrestled with what many have been calling a racial reckoning in America. Such a declaration is premature for this era of American history, as still, I too sing America. It is in reference to Langston Hughes and the many voices, translators, and amplifiers of the Black American experience that we present I Too Am America on loving and leading Black men and boys. Though equal parts memoir and historical account of the campaign for Black male achievement and a manifesto for a hopeful path forward, it is offered as a protest against America's continued racism, anti-Blackness, and systemic oppression of Black Americans, with a unique lens on the impact on Black men and boys. Courage, resilience, and vision are characters in this book, as are young men like Jamari Winston and Romero Wesson. My story is their story. Our stories are yours. These stories of loving, learning, and leading for and by Black men and boys epitomize the work described by Judy Toisen, author of Exceptional: Black Men Leading, Living, and Loving, in her mini manifesto contribution to the book. We need visionaries who can inspire us to reimagine and believe in what's possible. Finally, we need builders who can help create and sustain the infrastructure needed to guarantee that the Black boys born today inherit a more just world than we did. This is the work. It is big and it is important. So that's just a piece from the introduction of the book. I also say in the introduction of the book, besides Langston Hughes, I have the Indian novelist Arundhati Roy. She's in the room with me here. She has my book. She has my back. Maybe one day she'll have my book too. And she said at the outset of the pandemic, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world new. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And for me, writing this book, and it's a testament of bringing in midwives, right? The way my co-author, Nick Charles, whom I have known for 35 years, and Nick's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. This is his 20th book. And I said, I need help pulling this out. And the process was literally Zoom, me telling my story to Nick over Zoom. And I swear that I literally cried my way through this book. And I found that there is a difference between telling your story and owning your story, right? I talked about that Brene Brown quote, right? Because so much was lost in the translation. And for so long, I put the book down, didn't want to touch it, wanted to go to press, but I had to do some healing. During the process, when we finished the book, we went into a global pandemic. The campaign for Black male achievement, we sunsetted the operations, and I had to go through a process of leadership healing and deriving self-worth and validation, not externally, but internally, right? And I talked about it's taking a 59 years, and I think Althea Dryden, she is on this call, and I remember her asking me, when did you know the book was finishing? Or she might have said, when are you going to finish this damn thing, right? And I write in the book, in the introduction, the process of writing and publishing includes a stage of thinking the book is finished over and over again. After my third declaration that it's finished, Althea Dryden, a mini manifesto contributor and a leader with Cities United, asked me if it was finished or if I was just done. What had to happen in the years since I declared my book was done for my book to be finished? The year had to happen for sure. Oprah reminds us at the outset of her Super Soul podcast that the greatest gift we give ourselves is the gift of time. Time had to happen. Both the forward focused rhythm ticking of a celestial clock had to happen. The sequencing of days, nights, and seasons had to happen. The wayward wandering through a wilderness that the time travel of memory and manuscript invited me into had to happen. Both the meandering of the years gone by and realizing that time does not heal all wounds. Healing heals all wounds. And accepting that healing hurts had to happen. Realizing the book of my life will never be finished and the perpetual unfolding of untold stories will persist even long after I leave this planet had to happen. Wooing, cooing, and seducing the writing and publishing process had to happen too. I am still learning to embrace love and trust the process of writing, planning, climbing, celebrating, and crying that this process had evoked. I am also learning to love the fear, bravery, and everything else that comes with such an endeavor as this. All of this had to happen. Ushering in the 2020 New Year in Ghana, my first trip to Africa had to happen along with a return to the dark, damp dungeons where my ancestors' souls were stolen and amassed for the slave trade. AfricanAncestry.com had to happen, and the discovery that my ancestral lineage lay forever rooted in the soil of Sierra Leone with the Mende tribe and their rebellious spirit that transformed the Amistad into a freedom journey somewhere along the Middle Passage. And I tell the story of all that had to happen for me to get to the birthing this book. And I also write about the ability to go back and reframe our stories. Part of the memoir and a central part of the story, I talk about the Christmas, the Sunday after the Christmas of 1971, when I traveled the New York City subways all by myself for the first time. I was 9 years old, and my story was growing up, and I talk about this. One of the things I lifted up is that it's also not in my Bible, but I have my bio. I have a PhD from UCLA, and that's the university on the corner of Lenox Avenue in Harlem, right? And it's that corner there when we learned to play games like freeze tag, hot peas and butter. And it was on that corner where my godmother lived. And I stayed with my godmother during the week and my mother on the weekends. And my godmother ran numbers with Nicky Barnes' father, right? And for those of you who don't know Nicky Barnes, he was a notorious Harlem drug dealer. His father ran numbers with my godmother, and it was a really robust, extended community, huge Harlem flat. There were borders. If anyone ever saw the movie Lackawanna Blues with Hill Harper in it, that was my ethos, right? And I remember I wanted to prove that I can travel the New York City subways by myself. And on that Christmas, I was 9. One of the hustlers decided that I needed a fur coat for my birthday, right? Big afro, dimpled, curly hair Shawn, right? And my mother, who was a risk taker, a flower child of the 60s, and she said, okay, it wasn't uncommon for 9-year-olds to travel the subways by themselves. And I remember, as I write in the book, hopping on the subways in the South Bronx, going to my godmother's house to pick up a package. And we were supposed to, my mother and I, go see a James Bond movie. I think Diamonds Are Forever, when I got back. And on the way back, instead of getting on the uptown side, I got on the downtown side. And it began a perilous journey that you're gonna have to read the book to get the insides of it. When the doors opened, I was expecting to see 116th Street, the next stop going uptown, but downtown it was 110th. The doors closed, and what seemed like forever on this train, then the doors opened, it was 96th Street. I had never been below 110th Street before. And instead of, asking for help, instead of getting up and going on the uptown side, I got out as a 9-year-old with a fur coat, walked back to 116th Street and Lenox Avenue to begin my journey, and wound up getting abducted and my fur coat being stolen. And I tell that story and tell the story of how I realized through writing this book that two things can be true. For so many years, that was my Harlem resiliency story. I would tell that story over and over, mostly to my kids who were like, oh God, Daddy's telling this story again. And I would tell the Harlem resiliency story. And it wasn't until I was like 57 years old in a small leadership circle and telling the story when I realized that, yes, it was my Harlem resiliency story, but it was also my story of trauma. And I write about how we normalize trauma in the Black community. And I remember that there was no counseling. And I also had to have what I call this Resurrection Sunday experience with finishing the book, where on Easter Sunday of 2021, I had an opportunity to recount that journey as when I was a 9-year-old, and as a 58-year-old, I drove to my Bronx block, and I did the train ride all over. Went to the stoop of my godmother, the stoop with a picture of me on the cover of this presentation. And on the way back, instead of going on the downtown side, I took a picture of the downtown side and I went on the uptown side. And with me on this trip was 9-year-old Shawn. It was Big Shawn and Little Shawn. And I talk about that in the afterword. And I just want to share that story before opening up for just some dialogue. The afterword. Telling my story and sharing my life's work exemplifies the mission of the Campaign for Black Male Achievement: to love, learn, and lead Black men and boys. In the introduction, I've referenced Brene Brown's quote, "Owning your story and loving yourself through the process is the bravest thing you'll ever do." As one of the inspirational mission field mantras that focused me during the writing, editing, and publishing process of this book, what I have described as an excavation of the soul. I wanted to be a beacon of bravery, offering this book and my story to light the path for other Black men and boys to tell this I Too Am America's stories. I realize now there is an even braver step we can take beyond Brene's inspirational declaration. Yes, Owning our stories and loving ourselves through the process is a brave act, but the ability to relive and reframe our stories with curiosity, transparency, and grace while learning, loving, and leading ourselves through the process is a loving leap forward on the path to self-compassion, self-awareness, and ultimately healing. The many manifestos you just read were intentionally forward-thinking, designed to consider the question, where do we go from here within the field of Black male achievement? I wanted to give these leaders a platform from which to share their vision from the proverbial mountain and inspire you to do the same. Moving forward, creating spaces to curate and share our stories is a cornerstone of the building of the Corporation for Black Male Achievement vision. I've learned over and over through this process that in the spirit of Sankofa, we must go back in order to go forward. I know for certain now that sometimes going back is the only way to go forward. And owning our stories is the only way to share them. We all have impactful moments in our lives that continue to influence us long after they seemingly fail. I wanted to revisit for a moment a story I shared in part of this book. For almost 50 years of my life, I have told myself and anyone who would listen, especially my own children around the dinner table, about the day 9-year-old Shawn traveled the New York City subways for the first time by himself. Whether I called it the fur coat story or the Shawn Dove kidnapping story, I always framed it as my Harlem resiliency story. That December day in 1971 was indeed the making of my Harlem resiliency story, but I now know two things could be true. That was also my story of childhood trauma. Our I Too Am America stories too often normalize trauma for Black people in this nation, tricking us into believing that the pain, the poverty, the violence, and the senseless deaths are all normal parts of the Black experience. This is a lie. We must stop believing in ourselves and feeding it to others. The depth of this truth broke open for me nearly 48 years later. In the fall of 2019, amid the majestic redwood trees of Santa Clara, California, during a True North Leadership week-long immersion. Me and 70 leaders from around the country, most of whom I'd never met, shared the crucible moments of our life stories. While in my small subset circle of 5 colleagues with whom I dared to trust a little more each day, I shared my Harlem resiliency story once again. I sobbed uncontrollably while sharing the story. It was at that moment while breaking down that I began to also break through and open. And through ensuing sessions in therapy, I began to unpack and begin to heal from that traumatic experience in my childhood. And I go on to tell that day, that Easter Resurrection Sunday. I'm going to kind of skip ahead because I definitely wanted to leave time for us to share. But I talk about how I took pictures and that it was a surreal moment standing on that platform. I was big Shawn holding hands with 9-year-old little Shawn, telling him that he would be okay, letting him know that he made a mistake that day, that it was okay. I told him that his getting lost and the ensuing victimization wasn't his fault. It was no one's fault. It was life. Big Shawn told little Shawn on that platform to forgive himself and to realize how blessed he was a half century later to be the catalyst of his own healing. And that's so much what this book is about. It's a story of healing. It's a story of vulnerability. Yes, it's a story of the campaign for Black male achievement, and I write about being across the table from President Barack Obama and helping to convince him to launch My Brother's Keeper initiative. I tell the story of before I surrendered and went into recovery, the plan I had of jumping on the tracks on 34th Street in Penn Station and grabbing the third rail. And I thank God that I didn't do that, because so much of what I've been able to do in my life would not have happened. And as I close, I just want to offer anyone that's thinking of this book writing journey, comparison is a calling killer to creating your book, comparing yourself to others, even in the writing process. The copy editor came back and she said, this is really good, but I don't know where I don't really see loving and leading in the book. And I was like, hold on, what do you mean? Then the proofreader came back and she said, this was great. I laughed, I cried, I would buy this book. And then I realized, Shawn, there are going to be people that say I love this, and there are going to be people that say I don't. But this book is for my divinity and this journey and this process to touch someone else who has a story and maybe on the platform of, this is, okay, I didn't get to these slides, but I just want to close that I didn't do this by myself. And this, the book is for someone that, and particularly a young Black man that may be standing on the platform thinking about giving up. And my vulnerability convinces them that they should give themselves another chance. And I just want to thank so many of the Sherpas that were on this mountain with me. Many of you, Jenny and Althea and Chris, that are on this call. Thank you. I love you. And I just want to open it up for conversation. And this is my first book talk, and kind of you guys are getting a sonogram. I don't get to hold the baby. This is the last sonogram before the baby is delivered.
Shawn, thank you so much. I want to open it up as well and give people a chance to ask questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And while people are putting some questions and comments in the chat, I just want to thank you for sharing this concept of vulnerability as sexiness. What's more vulnerable than writing your life story, than writing a book, and then having people critique it and say, oh, well, this is really great, and this is something I don't get. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing your Harlem resiliency story, the Shawn Dove kidnapping story, and really shedding light to the way in which we normalize trauma in the Black community. And I'm so excited to read it, and I'm excited to see some of the questions that are hopefully coming in the chat.
And Sana, what I want to also let folks know, and Rebecca knows this, and folks on the, a lot happened since we started this book and finished it. And one of them was the campaign for Black male achievement sunsetting. And during this process, one of the things I realized, and someone needs to hear this, is that if you can reframe your seeming failure, you can reframe your future. And I had to reframe this failure story, right? It was supposed to be a 3-year initiative, and here we were 12 years later, and all that we have done. And so I want readers also, someone that's, grappling with failure, and what? I can reframe my failure story.
Sure, that's very powerful. So a question that came in from Allison Drennan. She'd love to hear more about your relationship with the co-author and the process of creating the book. I know you talk about it as kind of a birthing experience, and I'd also like to add to that, what really kept you up at night when you were writing this?
Wow. And so Nick Childs is the co-author of the book, and he's been a good friend, and I've been the best man in I think 2 of his weddings. And Nick, I tell the story in the book of how I resigned as executive director of the Dome Project to go into a therapeutic community and to surrender to my addiction and feeling a lot of shame. And Nick, while I was in this therapeutic community in the Christmas of 1989, he sent me a Christmas card that had a Black Santa Claus. And I don't remember what he wrote in that card, but I do remember how it made me feel. It gave me hope. And we have been partners in so many projects for years. Since then, the last 31, 32 plus years. And I tried to write this book back in 2014. It was entitled The Summer of the Verdict and the Speech, when President Obama made his speech after the not guilty verdict of George Zimmerman and the murder of Trayvon Martin. Was working with Joshua Dubois, but I wasn't ready. And as I said, I knew that this had to come out of me. And in 2019, partnered with Nick. And so the process was me telling my story and him interviewing me over Zoom and transcripting my story, right? And Nick is, this is his 20th book, and he's written books for Al Sharpton, Bobby Brown. He has a book coming out this year with Jamie Foxx, and so we're going back and forth. And I will tell you, when the manuscript came in, it was almost like a baby I didn't want to hold, right? And look at my own story, just the vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And so over the last, I would say, year, it's been a process of diving in and adding my asset base. And when I say, so for example, one of the chapter titles that Nick had was An Addict is Born. And I was like, no, I wouldn't say that. That chapter became Braving My Wilderness. Another chapter talks about me growing up in the Dome Project, right? And I show this picture of two of my buddies that I am still in contact with. That's us in 1978. That's us in 2019. We all lost hair and gained weight, obviously. But, we were together in a youth program called the Dome Project, and his framing was saved by the dome. And I was like, no, one of my mantras is Black men and boys, we don't need saviors. What we need are believers in our humanity, believers in our potential, believers in our beauty. And I changed that chapter to finding a home in the dome, right? And so there are many folks in addition to Nick. And let me just say this, that I went to high school, my last 2 years of high school, with a woman by the name of Maria Rodell. And she owns Rodell Press. And she was in my poetry class. And I showed her this manuscript, and she was like, I love this, read it. And she introduced me to her agent. And so I was all set to do the publishing, self-publishing. And I met with her agent, and her agent said, you got to pick. This is a memoir, manifesto, and it's also kind of a biographical account of your work. It can't be all three. This is you got to change the title. And I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Yeah, it would be nice to have an agent and go to the mainstream publishing houses. But I said to her, no, I'm going to self-publish it. And 828, we have a book blessing and celebration, sending it to the printer. And the first week of November, the actual book will be out. 828, which is a significant date. That was the date on the March of Washington in 1963. And 828 in 2008, the Democratic nominee was announced, Barack Obama. In 1955, Emmett Till on 828 was tragically murdered. And we had that date as the publication date. And we said, no, we still have to do something. So it's going to be the celebration and blessing of the book. And I'm just putting up that flyer. So I know there are more questions. I've been rambling, and I want to open it up for some more questions.
Sure. So someone sent me a direct message question, and then the details for the book blessing and celebration are also in the chat. And you can also pre-order the book at doveswords.com, which is in the chat. And the direct message question that I got, which will be the last question, is it says, personal advice, how do I raise Black young men?
So that's not alone is the first answer. I was raised by a single mom, but my mother demonstrated how to use community capacity and capital and bringing in the community. I would say environment matters, affirming environment. What you say is as equally important as what you do, because we grew up sticks and stones won't won't break my bones, words don't matter, but words do matter. It is so important to have an asset frame approach with raising Black boys and seeing their beauty and their humanity. I think too often in this society, we are asking Black boys and Black men, what's wrong with you, instead of what happened to you, right? I am just so grateful that I grew up as and come of age as a Black father to show my vulnerability in front of my, not only boys, but all my children. They have seen me cry. They have seen me say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You know, my generation, adults did not do that. To raise a Black boy, it is required. It's a battle. It's you have to put on the full armor, I would say, of God, and defend that potential and that light that's inside of all of our children and Black boys. And the other thing I will say is to have the long game. And I will bring that up with me. My twin boys are 19 now. Not comparing my 19 to their 19. Not comparing this season right now. That is this is it. And looking at the long game and remembering where I was, Shawn, at 19 years old, and practicing empathy. And I will say, the more self-compassion that I'm practicing, the levels of self-love is equal to the levels of compassion and love that I am able to give. And so I would say, work harder on yourself than you are on than you do on your parenting. That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Such a dynamic question, and really appreciate the way in which you answer that and share all this with us. Other questions? I think what we're going to do is Katie has a couple of reminders, and I think a slide that she's going to share. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that 10 people will win a chance to receive an audiobook for the session. And I think Katie's going to share that information.
Yeah, so just 10 people from this call. We'll go ahead and choose it pretty randomly, but you have the chance to get an ebook of an e-copy of Shawn's book when it's released. And we also wanted to remind you to visit the Leaders Story website. It has lots of great stories on it of leadership and impact, and it has the Leaders Voices podcast, which is a great listen. I think there's 2 episodes out so far right now. And yeah, that's basically all we have to share. Thank you again so much, Shawn, for sharing. This was really great listening, and I'm so excited to read the book.
And so I would be remiss if I did not share that you can pre-order the book. I'm excited. We have over 400 pre-orders already, and before it's even on Amazon. And I'm told that's pretty good for someone self-publishing. So you can go to doveswords.com to pre-order of the book. And I'm asking folks to share that link with folks and join us on Saturday between 2 and 4 for the book lesson and celebration. I also want to share that one of the things I love most about the book is all the heads, hands, and hearts that are involved. The book is sandwiched with Elder Grace. Susan Taylor has written the foreword, and she's been a longtime mentor. And another mentor of mine, Alfonso Wyatt, he has written the epilogue, and just so sandwiched there with those two. And it just has also the book of so many other leaders in the mini manifesto aspect. So that's what I really love about this book, the image of us going up the mountain together.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to read the book and attend the blessing, and I really appreciate it. I was so nervous to talk to you today after reading some of the incredible work you've done. So it's an honor. And thank you everyone for joining. Just want to share really quick, our next session is Thursday, September 23rd. We have Terry Broussard-Williams, and her book is called Find Your Fire. And that information is right up on your screens. So looking forward to that. And thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining.
Great job. Thank you.